At 6:12 a.m. on April 8, 1945, the cockpit of AP-47 Thunderbolt vibrated with the raw power of its engine and the relentless rattle of flak. The sky over central Germany was a battlefield of black puffs and orange tracers, the ground below a blur of fields and shattered towns. 19-year-old Lieutenant Davey Carter, on his first combat mission, gripped the stick with sweaty hands, his heart pounding in his chest. The radio crackled with frantic voices. "Bandits, 6 o'clock!" As enemy fighters closed in, their silhouettes darting through the morning haze. Davy's mind raced. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the vibration of the Pratt and Whitney engine through the seat, the metallic taste of fear in his mouth. He'd trained for this, but nothing in the manuals or the briefings had prepared him for the chaos of real combat. Tracer rounds streaked past his canopy, so close he could see the red glow as they zipped by. The world shrank to the roar of the engine, the rattle of the guns, and the enemy closing behind him. Then, in a split second, born of panic, instinct, and the desperate urge to survive, Davy yanked the stick hard, sending the Thunderbolt into a maneuver no one in his squadron had ever seen. The world tilted. The sky and earth traded places, and the German fighters behind him were suddenly caught off guard, overshooting their mark. For a heartbeat, time stood still. The stakes were life and death, and the outcome was anything but certain. In that moment, a rookie's mistake would change the course of the fight and leave veterans across the airfield speechless. To understand the chaos Lieutenant Davey Carter faced that April morning, you have to step back into the final, desperate months of World War II in Europe. By the spring of 1945, the skies over Germany were a crucible, filled with the thunder of engines, the flash of flak, and the deadly ballet of fighter and bomber squadrons locked in a struggle for survival. The Allies had air superiority, but the Luftwaffe was far from finished. Every mission was a gauntlet, every sortie a test of nerve and skill. The P-47 Thunderbolt, the aircraft Davy flew, was a beast of machine nicknamed the Jug by those who loved her and the Flying Tank by those who survived her. She was heavy, rugged, and fast, powered by a massive Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engine that could push her to over 400 miles per hour. 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns lined her wings, capable of unleashing a torrent of lead that could shred enemy fighters and ground targets alike. The Thunderbolt could take punishment that would cripple lesser planes. Her thick armor and self-sealing fuel tanks often brought pilots home with wings full of holes and engines coughing smoke. But the Jug's greatest strength was also her challenge. She was unforgiving to the inexperienced. Young replacement pilots, like Davy, faced a brutal learning curve. Many had only a handful of hours in combat before being thrown into the maelstrom. The pressure to perform was immense. The older hands watched the new kids with a mix of pity and skepticism, knowing that the sky was the only real teacher, and she was merciless. German aces, many with dozens of kills, still prowled the clouds in their Focke-Wulf FW-190s and Messerschmitt Bf-109s. They knew every trick, every weakness in Allied tactics. They attacked in tight formations, using the sun, the clouds, and the confusion of battle to their advantage. Their discipline was legendary, their aggression undimmed by the knowledge that the war was slipping away. For every Allied pilot, the threat was constant. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and you could be the next name on the missing list. Air superiority was more than a strategic goal. It was a matter of survival. The bombers depended on the fighters to clear the way, and the fighters depended on each other to make a home. The psychological toll was immense. Pilots lived with the knowledge that every mission could be their last. They coped with gallows humor, rituals, and the unspoken bond of those who had seen death and come back to tell the tale. For Davey Carter, the stakes were clear. He was the youngest in his squadron, the rookie with everything to prove. The Thunderbolt was a shield and a sword, but it was also a test, a machine that demanded respect, punished mistakes, and, in the hands of the desperate or the inspired, could do the impossible. In the skies over Germany, every flight was a gamble, and every pilot knew that history was written in split-second decisions. Davy's story was about to become one of those moments, a flash of instinct that would leave veterans speechless and change the way air combat was fought. Davey Carter's story began far from the chaos of war, in the wide, sun-baked fields of rural Texas. born in 1925. He was the youngest of five, the quiet one who spent more time in the barn than in the house. His father, a crop-dusting mechanic, taught Davy to fly before he could drive. By the time he was 16, Davy could coax an old Stearman biplane into the air, skim the tops of cotton fields, and land on a dirt strip with nothing but instinct and a steady hand. The farm taught him patience. The sky taught him courage. And the engine taught him respect for every bolt and wire. When war came, Davy enlisted with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Flight school was a blur of early mornings, endless checklists, and a constant roar of engines. He devoured every manual he could find, staying up late to memorize emergency procedures and dogfighting tactics. The older cadets teased him. "Hey, Texas, you gonna crop dust a Luftwaffe?" But Davy just smiled and kept studying. He knew he was the youngest, the least experienced, but he was determined to prove he belonged. Assigned to a P-47 Thunderbolt Squadron in England, Davy found himself surrounded by veterans, men who had survived the worst the Luftwaffe could throw at them. The camaraderie was real, but so was the pecking order. The kid was expected to listen, learn, and keep his head down. Davy did all three, but he also took quiet pride in his skills. He could strip and reassemble his Thunderbolt's Pratt and Whitney engine faster than anyone in the unit. He spent hours in the cockpit, running through checklists, feeling the controls, making the machine an extension of himself.
Letters from home were his anchor, his mother's careful handwriting, his father's terse advice, his sister's jokes about the flying cowboy. But beneath the homesickness, Davy felt the weight of expectation. He wanted to prove himself not just to the squadron, but to himself. Every mission was a test, every takeoff a leap into the unknown. He watched the older pilots, learned their tricks, and listened to their warnings about flak, fighters, and the thin line between luck and skill. As the squadron prepared for the next mission, Davy's resolve hardened. He was no longer just the kid from Texas. He was a Thunderbolt pilot, and he was ready to face whatever the war would throw at him, even if it meant making a mistake that would change everything. At 4:45 a.m. on April 8, 1945, the airfield was shrouded in a cold, gray mist. The only light came from the yellow bulbs in the briefing hut, where the pilots of the 362nd Fighter Group gathered, boots thumping on the wooden floor, flight jackets zipped tight against the morning chill. Lieutenant Davey Carter sat near the back, helmet in his lap, eyes fixed on the map at the front of the room. The operations officer's pointer traced a red line deep into Germany, today's target. A rail yard outside Kassel, crawling with enemy armor and anti-aircraft guns. The room was thick with tension, broken only by the forced banter of men hiding their nerves. "You ready to show us how it's done, Texas?" One of the older pilots grinned, clapping Davy on the shoulder. "Just try not to get lost this time." Davy managed to smile, but his stomach churned. He listened as the intelligence officer rattled off the expected opposition, flak concentrations, Luftwaffe squadrons, the latest rumors of jet fighters. The weather officer warned of low clouds and crosswinds. The final words were always the same. "Good luck, gentlemen. See you at debrief." Outside, the P-47 Thunderbolts waited in neat rows, their olive-drab skins gleaming with dew. Davy ran his hand along the cowling of his jug, feeling the cold metal, the power beneath. He checked the bomb load, 2 500-pounders slung under the wings, 8.50 caliber Brownings loaded and ready. He ran through his pre-flight checks, fingers moving by memory. Fuel, oil, hydraulics, oxygen, radios. The ground crew gave him a thumbs up, and he climbed into the cockpit, strapping in as the engine coughed to life. The squadron taxied out, engines rumbling, propellers slicing the mist. The radio crackled with call signs and last-minute jokes. "Don't forget to wave at the flak, boys." Davy's heart pounded as the throttle opened, the jug surging down the runway, tail lifting, wheels leaving the earth. The world shrank to the roar of the engine, the vibration of the stick, the tight formation of thunderbolts climbing into the dawn. As they crossed the channel, the sun broke through, painting the clouds gold. Davy glanced at the faces in the other cockpits, some grinning, some grim, all knowing the risks. The radio was alive with coded chatter. The flight leader's voice calm and steady. "Stay sharp. Watch your six. We're not alone up here." The German border loomed ahead, and with it, the knowledge that not all of them would return. Davey flexed his gloved hands, eyes scanning the horizon, every sense alive. The mission had begun, and the sky was waiting. At 7:23 a.m. on April 8, 1945, the sky over Germany was a killing ground. Davey Carter's P-47 Thunderbolt shuddered as the first bursts of flak erupted around the squadron, black clouds blooming in the morning light. The radio crackled with warnings. "Flak, 9 o'clock, break left." As the formation tightened, each pilot scanning the horizon for the enemy they all knew was coming. Suddenly, they appeared, for Focke-Wulf 190s, gray and angular, diving out of the sun. Davey's heart hammered in his chest as he gripped the stick, the vibration of the engine thrumming through his bones. The world shrank to the cockpit, the roar of the Pratt and Whitney engine, the smell of cordite and sweat. Tracers zipped past his canopy, red and white lines of death. The squadron leader's voice was calm but urgent. "Bandits, high and fast. Defend the bombers." Davey's training took over. He rolled right, feeling the G-forces press him into the seat, and lined up on a German fighter as it flashed past. He squeezed the trigger, 8.50 caliber Browning spat fire, the barrels jerking in their mounts. The FW-190 banked hard, smoke trailing from its wing, but another was already on Davey's tail. The radio was a chaos of shouts and curses, the sky a blur of twisting metal and burning fuel. A flak burst rocked the Thunderbolt, shrapnel rattling against the armor. Davey's head snapped forward, his vision swimming. He fought the controls, feeling the stick go heavy in his hands. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared back to life. He glanced at the gauges, oil pressure dropping, temperature rising. The P-47 could take a beating, but even the jug had its limits. The German ace was relentless. He closed in, cannons blazing, rounds hammering the tail and wings. Davey's mind raced, memories of training, the voices of older pilots, the warnings about never flying straight and level in a fight. He jinked left, then right, the Thunderbolt groaning under the strain. The FW-190 stayed with him, a shadow he couldn't shake. The squadron was in chaos. 2 Thunderbolts spiraled down trailing smoke, another limped away toward the west. Davey's wingman was gone, shot down or lost in the confusion. He was alone, the enemy closing in, the ground spinning below. The radio was silent now, the only sound the scream of the engine and the rattle of bullets on metal.
Desperation took hold. Davey yanked the stick back, climbing hard, then kicked the rudder and rolled inverted. The world flipped, sky below, earth above. The G-forces pressed him into the harness, his vision narrowing to a tunnel of blue and gray. The German ace overshot, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver. Davey rolled upright, leveled out, and fired a burst as the FW-190 flashed past. The enemy plane shuddered, smoke pouring from the engine, then spiraled away toward the ground. For a moment, time stood still. Davey's hands shook on the stick, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The sky was suddenly empty, the enemy gone, the squadron scattered. He checked his instruments, damage everywhere, but the jug was still flying. He looked down at his hands, stained with sweat and oil, and realized he was alive. The first engagement was over, but the war was far from done. Davey Carter, the rookie from Texas, had survived his baptism by fire. He had faced the enemy, improvised under pressure, and lived to fight another day. The lessons of the dogfight, fear, courage, and the thin line between them, would stay with him forever, shaping the pilot and the man he was becoming. At 7:29 a.m. on April 8, 1945, the sky over Germany was a blur of chaos and color. Davey Carter's P-47 Thunderbolt was battered, the canopy streaked with oil, the engine howling in protest. The German ace was still on his tail, relentless, his FW-190's guns flashing in the morning light. Davey's mind raced, every nerve on fire, every instinct screaming for survival. He could feel the G-forces pressing him into the seat, the stick vibrating in his gloved hand. The world outside the canopy spun. Blue sky, green earth, black smoke. The radio was a jumble of shouts and static, the voices of the squadron fading in and out. "Break, Davy. Break now," someone yelled. But the enemy was too close. The usual maneuvers useless. In that split second, panic and instinct collided. Davy remembered a fragment from training, a warning, not a lesson. Never try a negative G dive in combat. You'll lose control, black out, maybe tear the wings off. But there was no time for caution. With the German ace closing in, Davy yanked the stick forward hard and stomped the rudder. The Thunderbolt's nose dropped violently, the horizon flipping as the world turned upside down. The G-forces vanished, replaced by a sickening weightlessness. Davy's stomach lurched, his vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he might pass out. The P-47 snapped into a negative G dive, the engine screaming, the wings shuddering as the airspeed climbed. The world outside the canopy was a kaleidoscope. Sky, earth, sky again. The German ace, caught off guard, overshot, his FW-190 flashing past in a blur of gray and black crosses. Davy's thoughts raced. He remembered the instructor's voice. Negative G dives are forbidden. You'll lose oil pressure, star the engine, maybe rip the tail off. But the Thunderbolt held together, the big Pratt & Whitney engine roaring in defiance. Davy fought the controls, leveling out just above the treetops, the ground rushing past in a green and brown smear. He could see the enemy fighters above, circling in confusion, searching for their vanished prey. The radio crackled to life. "Where the hell did you go, Texas?" another pilot shouted, awe and disbelief in his voice. Davy grinned, adrenaline surging, as he pulled back on the stick and climbed for altitude. The German ace tried to follow, but the sudden maneuver had thrown off his aim, left him exposed. Davy rolled inverted, lined up his guns, and fired a burst. Tracer stitched the sky, and the FW-190 broke away, trailing smoke. For a moment, time slowed. Davy's hands trembled on the stick, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The P-47 was battered but still flying, the engine coughing but alive. He looked down at the countryside below, fields, rivers, the distant spires of a ruined town. He had survived, not by following the rules, but by breaking them in a moment of desperation. The squadron regrouped, the radio alive with chatter. "Did you see that move? I've never seen a jug do that." Texas just wrote a new chapter in the manual. The older pilots, veterans of 100 dogfights, were speechless. Davey Carter, the rookie, had done the impossible, escaped a German ace with a maneuver no one had ever dared to try. As the adrenaline faded, Davey felt a wave of exhaustion and relief. He knew he'd been lucky, maybe even reckless, but he'd survived. The forbidden move, the negative G dive, had saved his life and changed the fight. The P-47, the flying tank, had proven its worth once again, and Davey had proven himself, not just to the squadron, but to himself. The mission wasn't over, but the legend had begun. Davey's accidental move would be dissected, debated, and eventually imitated. For now, he was just grateful to be alive, the sky clear for a moment, the enemy left behind. The war would go on, but the rules had changed, and a 19-year-old rookie had shown the veterans that sometimes survival means daring to do the unthinkable. By 10:15 a.m. on April 8, 1945, the airfield was alive with a familiar chaos of returning pilots, engines cooling, ground crews swarming, the smell of oil and sweat thick in the spring air. Davey Carter's P-47 rolled to a stop, battered but intact, its paint scorched and pitted from flak. He climbed down from the cockpit, legs trembling, heart still racing from fight. Around him, the other pilots gathered, their faces a mix of relief, exhaustion, and something else, curiosity. Inside the briefing hut, the atmosphere was electric. The older pilots, men with dozens of missions behind them, leaned in as Davey recounted the dogfight. He described a moment the German ace locked onto his tail, the split-second decision to yank the stick forward, the world flipping as a Thunderbolt dove into a forbidden negative G maneuver. The room was silent as he spoke, every man picturing the sky spinning, the enemy overshooting, the impossible escape. The squadron commander, a veteran with silver at his temples, frowned as he listened. "You did what?" he asked, incredulous. Davey explained again, hands tracing the motion in the air. The intelligence officers scribbled notes. The mechanics exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "That's not in the manual." Another pilot, eyes wide, whispered, "I've never seen a jug move like that." The technical analysis began. The commander asked about airspeed, G-forces, engine response. The flight leader wondered aloud why the maneuver worked, how the sudden negative G dive had thrown off the Germans' aim, how the P-47's rugged design had survived the stress. They debated the risks, loss of oil pressure, structural failure, blackout. But the evidence was undeniable. Davey was alive, and the enemy was not. The emotional tone shifted from skepticism to pride. The older pilots, once dismissive, now looked at Davey with new respect. The kid had done something no one else had dared to try, and it had worked. The debriefing turned into a brainstorming session, pilots eager to test and move themselves, to see if lightning could strike twice. As the meeting broke up, the squadron buzzed with excitement. Davey's accident was no longer a rookie's blunder. It was a potential new tactic, a weapon born of desperation and instinct. For the first time, Davey felt the weight of respect settle on his shoulders. He was no longer just the youngest pilot in the squadron. He was the man who had changed the rules, and the sky would never be the same. By the end of April 1945, word of Davey Carter's accidental maneuver had spread far beyond the battered airstrip in Germany. What began as a desperate, split-second gamble was now the talk of every ready room from England to the front lines. Pilots who had once dismissed Davey as a rookie now crowded around him, eager to hear every detail of the move that had left the German ace spinning and the squadron in awe. The squadron commander, a veteran of North Africa and Normandy, called a special briefing. Chalk dust squeaked on the blackboard as he diagrammed Davey's negative G dive, tracing the impossible arc that had thrown off the enemy's aim and saved a Thunderbolt from certain destruction. "It's not in the manual," he admitted, "but it worked. And in this war, what works is what keeps you alive." Technical officers pored over the flight data, analyzing the stresses on the P-47's airframe, the risk of oil starvation, the limits of the Pratt and Whitney engine. They debated the dangers, structural failure, blackout, loss of control. But the evidence was clear. The Thunderbolt could take it, and in the hand of a pilot with nerves of steel, the maneuver could turn the tables on even the most experienced foe. Soon, the tactic was being taught in informal sessions, passed from pilot to pilot like a secret handshake. In the mess hall, veterans and rookies alike swapped stories of trying to move, some with success, others with near misses. "You've got to feel the jug," one pilot said. "Let her talk to you. Don't force it or she'll bite back." The negative G dive became a tool in the arsenal, a last-ditch escape for those willing to risk everything for a shot at survival. The ripple effect reached beyond the squadron. In the weeks that followed, other groups reported similar maneuvers, Thunderbolts and Mustangs diving away from enemy fighters, rolling inverted, pulling out at treetop level. German pilots, once confident in their ability to predict Allied moves, found themselves outfoxed by a tactic they'd never seen. "The Americans are flying like madmen," one Luftwaffe ace wrote in his diary. "They dive when they should climb, roll when they should run. It's chaos." The tactic wasn't without its dangers. Not every pilot could pull it off. Some lost control, some blacked out, a few crashed. But for those who mastered it, the move became a legend, a symbol of innovation born from desperation, of the thin line between genius and disaster. Davey's mistake was now a weapon, a story told in every squadron, a lesson in the value of thinking differently when the stakes are life and death. Davey watched the transformation with a mix of pride and humility. He saw older pilots, men he'd once idolized, ask for his advice, run through the maneuver in the safety of the briefing room before trying it in the sky. He heard the laughter, the disbelief, the grudging respect. The kid from Texas had changed the rules, and the veterans were the first to admit it. On later missions, Davey saw the tactic in action. He watched a wingman shake a pair of FW-190s with a sudden dive, saw a rookie pull out of a hopeless situation by trusting his instincts and the strength of his jug. Each time, Davey felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for the brotherhood of pilots who had learned to survive by daring to do the unthinkable. The war would end soon, but the legend of the accidental move would live on, a testament to the power of innovation, the courage to break the rules, and the unbreakable spirit of those who fought in the skies above a world at war. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, but for Davey Carter, the echoes of battle lingered long after the guns fell silent. The airfields emptied, the thunderbolts were lined up wingtip to wingtip, and the men who had survived packed their duffel bags and waited for the long journey home. Yet among the stories that drifted through the barracks and mess halls, one tale was told and retold. The rookie who, in a moment of desperation, had changed the way men fought and survived in the sky. Davey's return to Texas was a blur of parades, handshakes, and awkward interviews. The local paper called him the kid who fooled the Luftwaffe. His squadron sent him home with a battered P-47 panel, signed by every man who'd flown with him. The Air Force brass wanted to know every detail of his maneuver, how he'd thought of it, what it felt like, whether it could be taught. Davey tried to explain that it hadn't been genius, just instinct and luck, but the legend had already taken on a life of its own. The negative G dive, once a forbidden move whispered about in training, was now part of the official playbook. Instructors at flight schools across the country taught it as Carter's role, a last-ditch escape for pilots with the nerve to try it. Veterans who had once scoffed at the rookie now told new recruits, if you're ever in a jam, remember what Davey did. The P-47, once just another fighter, now carried a new legend, a symbol of innovation, courage, and the willingness to break the rules when survival was on the line. But recognition came with a cost. Davey carried the memories of those who hadn't made a home, the friends lost in fire and flak, the empty bunks in the barracks, the letters he'd written to families who would never see their sons again. The burden of survival was heavy, a weight that medals and parades could never lift. In quiet moments, he wondered why he had lived when so many others had not. He replayed the dogfights in his mind, the split-second decisions, the faces of the men who had trusted him with their lives. Yet, for all the pain, there was pride. Davey knew he had made a difference, not just for himself, but for every pilot who would fly into danger with a new tool, a new hope. The war had changed him, forged him in fire, and left it with scars both visible and hidden. But it had also given him a legacy, a story of courage, innovation, and the power of a single moment to change the course of history. As the years passed, Davey's story became part of the larger tapestry of air combat, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unlikely places. The legend of the accidental move lived on, not just in manuals and briefings, but in the hearts of those who understood what it meant to risk everything for a chance at survival. And in every sky where pilots dared to push the limits, Davey Carter's spirit flew with them, a silent testament to the enduring power of courage and ingenuity. As we close a chapter on Davey Carter's remarkable first mission, take a moment to reflect on the courage, ingenuity, and split-second decisions that shaped not just one pilot's fate, but the very tactics of air combat. If you or someone in your family has a story of service, innovation, or survival, whether in the skies, on the ground, or at sea, we invite you to share it in the comments below. Your memories and insights help keep these legacies alive, connecting generations and honoring those who stood their ground when it mattered most. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more true accounts of forgotten heroes, battlefield innovation, and the untold moments that change history. Every like, comment, and share helps us reach more people and preserve these stories for future generations. Don't let these lessons fade into silence. Be part of a community that values courage, ingenuity, and remembrance. And if you think you've heard it all, stay tuned. Our next episode uncovers another hidden chapter of World War II, a story so unexpected, it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the war. Don't miss it.